Hello, sociologists, and welcome to our third lesson on Sudanese Australians. Today we're going to be talking about cultural activities. So it's kind of just an expansion on some of the material that we looked at in a previous lesson about Sudanese culture. So let's get into it. Learning goals today are you're going to know some cultural activities of Sudanese Australians. I'm going to look at those 5 things in particular: practicing religion, dancing, eating, celebrating, and playing sport. And you're going to know some sociological terminology because I'm going to make you do about 15 minutes of the quizlet again at the end of this lesson for homework. Okay, practicing religion. So we want to split this into South Sudan and Sudan. So the South Sudanese are more religious than Australian people on the whole. That's probably true for Sudanese as well. Atheism and agnosticism is unusual. So this here shows the average religious affiliation of Australians in general. Yeah, about 2/3 are Christian and quite a big number of atheists there in blue. Yeah. Now compare that with Sudanese migrants. So that's Australia. Here's Sudanese, South Sudanese, right? They're almost all different types of Christian. There you go. Okay, and now to look at Sudanese people, Sudanese Australians. So, back in Sudan, the official state religion is Islam. That's Sunni Islam, yeah? There are 2 types of Islam, Sunni and Shiite. Sunni is far more common around the world. Islam as a religion is much more involved in politics than other religions are, and so Islam is quite influential in the Sudanese government. They have Sharia law there. In Sudan, 97% of people are Muslim, so you can kind of assume that people from Sudan, when they migrate over to here, are most likely to be Muslim, whereas remember, South Sudanese, more likely to be Christian. Right, let's look at our next one. Dancing. Okay, a very diverse culture, so there's lots of different types of dance. It's used in social events like weddings, parties, and it's even used in funerals. Tribal dancers can get inspiration from all kinds of things, just like tribal dancers for Indigenous Australians would look at their individual dreaming, like might be influenced by animals. Sudanese tribal dancers can be inspired by animals or natural events like the sea and wind. So here we've got a South Sudanese dance group helping youths to stay connected. So keeping them connected with their culture from back in South Sudan. There's a great quote there. Australia is where we belong now, but it's good to not forget where we've come from. Yeah, throughout this case study, it's going to be important to think about this idea of walking the line between keeping traditional culture, which comes, a lot of these people were not born in Sudan or South Sudan, but they got a lot of very strong cultural influence from their parents, who in a lot of cases would want them to retain their Sudanese and South Sudanese ethnicity. There's a whole big article about this, and then they did a big dance performance, and this was on SBS. Yeah, so again we're seeing SBS as an example of migrant groups being able to access material to do with their cultures. So here's that awesome dance crew, the Twik Mayardit dance group from Western Sydney, looking swish. So here you can see on Facebook advertised a cultural dance competition for South Sudanese people. This was held 5 years ago. Check it out, 716 people went. There you go, so that's a pretty big deal. And it went over 3 days. And it was hosted by Bossman Sound System. Look at that. The winner's got $5,000 in cash. That's a huge deal. And here's all the tribes, names of all the different tribes that were represented. So there you go. Supported by the South Sudanese Community, Victoria. Yep, and here's the big ad for that. So this was something. I'm assuming this happens every year. There you go. Started on Boxing Day to Sunday, so it goes over. So it starts after Christmas, and there's a list of all of the different tribal dances that are going to be going on. Fun times. $5,000 for the winner. Sudanese Australians, just like everyone else, enjoy celebrating, and here are some special days that they celebrate. A couple of different Independence Days. Firstly, there's Independence from Britain. Should be a capital B there. Naughty. 1st of January, that's celebrated, 1956. Independence from Britain. 1st of January is also the same day Australia got independence from Britain, although that was in 1901. Actually, was that independence? No, it was just going from colonies to... whatever. The Sudanese enjoyed Independence Day on the 1st of January. And South Sudanese celebrate another Independence Day, Independence from Sudan, and that's held on the 9th of July, celebrating the event that took place on the 9th of July 2011. Also, religious festivals, obviously the Christian festivals that many of us probably already know about, like Easter and Christmas. That would be primarily for South Sudanese, as they're more likely to be Christian, and then Muslim religious festivals, that's more likely to be Sudanese people who are predominantly Muslim. And a couple of the big ones there are Ramadan, which is the moving month of fasting, and then Eid, which is the celebration that ends Ramadan. Here's a commemorative stamp that commemorating Sudan's independence from Britain, 1st of September 1956. There you go. This is not from Australia. This is a photo from South Sudan. That's a dude holding up the South Sudanese flag. This is a bunch of South Sudanese people on South Sudanese Independence Day celebrating. This guy, I don't know what's going on with this guy down here. He looks like he's having a heart attack. Who knows? And just a nice little slide that looks cool. Ramadan with the crest. Yay! South Sudanese people also quite sporty. They like to play sport. They like to play AFL. There's a number of fairly famous Sudanese Australian AFL players. They also love to play basketball. There's quite a few who've got to the top rung in Australian basketball. Obviously back in Sudan, and still important here, is soccer, because remember, soccer, or football as everyone else calls it, is the world's most popular sport. And back in Sudan, track and field's quite big, so it's still quite big over here. Here's a Sudanese Australian AFL player. I knew his name, but I've forgotten it. Anyway, cool. He's holding 2 balls. I think that's cheating. Here's another couple of Sudanese players marking each other. At least the guy on the front, Sudanese Australian. I don't know about the guy on the back. Check out this article from The Raw, which is an Australian sports website. It talks about the impact of Sudanese Australian athletes on the sporting landscape. So here's Majak Daw. He's a player for the Kangaroos. And then the article talks about the fact that this guy here, Joseph Deng, a Sudanese Australian, broke the Australian 800 metres record, which has been standing for over 60, 70 years or so. Yep. There you go. There's a whole big article about the big impact that these Sudanese Australian athletes are having. So on athletics, track and field is pretty big back in Sudan. On the AFL, there's quite a few Sudanese Australian AFL players these days. And on basketball, yeah, Sudanese Australians are tall, fairly athletic. Yep, and they're having a little bit of an impact on soccer as well. So there you go. Big impact on Australian sport. Eating food communally is a large part of Sudanese Australian culture. Big part of their culture is sharing food. That's how you demonstrate hospitality and generosity towards others. Everyone's very generous with sharing food and bringing food, and a lot of people will take food home from dinner parties. Traditionally, you would sit on the floor and eat with your right hand. Now, whether that still happens in all Sudanese Australian families, probably not. In Australia, it's more common that you'll be sharing food with both men and women, which is a big change. Remember from our lesson a couple of lessons ago that there's a much bigger gender divide in traditional Sudanese culture than there is in Australian culture, and so the change to Australian culture has meant quite a big change in that sense. Hey, it's old mate Yasmin, who is sitting there cooking some traditional Sudanese food. Yep. Anyway, she left. Bummer. Super simple activity for you today. I just want you to think. This is a thinking activity, no writing required, but I do want you to do it. How are these different to how you do it? Okay, think about how Sudanese Australians do these things, and I want to think, how are they different? How do you do it? No, how is it different? So, Sudanese Australians, they practice religion. How do you practice religion if you do? How's it different? Dancing. Think about the traditional dancing that Sudanese Australians do. How's it different to how you do it? Eating. Traditional Sudanese people sit on the floor, eat with their right hand, and they share food a lot. They're all about generosity. And celebrating public holidays and religious festivals. How's that different to how you do it? And playing sport. Just have a think about those things. Okay, our lesson today is the African refugees in Australia experience back in Africa. So check this out.
The latest wave of refugees coming to Australia are from Africa. I'm interested to know more about my new neighbours. David Quayle, a master's student originally from Sudan, believes the Western media portrays Africa in a negative light. He wishes to rectify this situation by setting up an organisation, Images of Africa, that will help local people gain an insight into the real Africa.
We know that there's a lot of conflict in Africa. There are things like drought, there are things like diseases and other problems, but they actually happening in some sector of Africa in different countries. Africa is a continent. It's got 53 or 54 countries, and only 5 countries are at war. But every time you see only Africa is being portrayed as it is entirely at war. Nobody focused to reflect on things like African cultures and other productive things there, like people who are doing successful business and those who are trying hard to actually bring change to the continent.
I appreciate what David is trying to do, but I think some of the stories of how refugees came to Australia from Africa, even though many of them are quite sombre, can provide us with a better understanding of the refugee experience. In Rwanda, the artificial divides imposed by colonial rule set up deep ethnic tensions which led to the scapegoating of the Tutsi minority. The shooting down of the president's plane in 1994 was a trigger that began the Tutsi genocide. I spoke with Irene about her experience during this time.
After President died, they started killing all the Tutsis in the country, and that's when my parents and my brothers and cousin and my grandmother been killed, and 12 people were at home, and me and my young sister, we managed to survive, and we were 7 and 8. We've been taken to be killed more than 4 times, but we don't know how we survived, but we did survive. People have been killed by machetes, and if you have money, you have to buy bullets, and so to die better. If we were so scared, everybody will find out who we are. So we were just shown, we were like stronger, and we couldn't show our emotion because then they'll find out who we are and then be killed.
For Irene, her faith in God was a big factor, she believes, in keeping her alive.
Well, when I was a little, we grew up in religion, and we always said that you've got a father and mother, but there is someone who loves you more than anything. That's God. And he can protect you in every single day, and wherever your parents will not be, he will be there. So the moment I lost my parents, So there were nobody, no one other than me that I could trust. It was me and my young sister. So the only God, it was the only, person that I had. So the person that I can't see, the God, the faith I had, is just to pray to Him, and I felt really protected, and I felt He was there for me. So I had the courage to keep going.
In the West, we have whole professions developed around dealing with trauma. In many cases, it is believed reliving that trauma will help one overcome it. Irene has a different philosophy.
I just had to accept it and move on. I mean, it happened to me. There's nothing I can do to change it. And if I can sit down and cry all the time or be angry, my life will be over. But I just have to move on. I just know, it's not me only that happened. So it happened to everybody else in the country. And it's not because of what I did or what my parents did. So you have to have a positive mind, knowing you're not wrong person, you're a good person. It's just what happened. And you can be a good person, you can be a good mother, you can be a good father. It doesn't have to be if you're a survivor of a war, you're a bad person, you are traumatized. It's not everybody. It's how you take it. Be happy. Like, I try to be happy, to be able to move on. I just thought there is a purpose why I'm still alive. There is a reason why I don't have any injuries from genocide. So if I think that I can't be sad, I can't have anger in my heart. I have to, to be positive, because what I've passed through, it's more than anything else. Whatever I do it with more my heart, because I had a second chance to live. So I use it as good as I can. Yeah.
Our second video for today is from the same video series, and it's African refugees in Australia. The last one was their experience in Africa. This one's their experience when they get here in Australia.
Rebecca from Sudan was one of the first African refugees to arrive in Tasmania 10 years ago. Learning English, particularly local phrases, was one of the first challenges she faced.
One day we were invited to go to somebody's house, and they said, you have to bring a plate. The other thing was like to take all the plate to the house, but my support group just came. She was going to take me, and I went to kitchen, taking out all the plate, and she was looking at me, what are you taking them? And I said, we're going to party, and we were biting, and they said, you have to bring along a plate. And she was laughing at me. She said, no, they don't mean that. Yeah, she was explaining that. It was funny.
3 of Rebecca's 5 children have been born in Australia. Differences in child-rearing practices presented Rebecca with her next cultural challenge.
Back home, if the child did something really bad, you have to smack the child, which is not allowed here. To smack the child is against the laws. Yeah, but it's very, very hard for us, because we didn't used to that, but we have to learn now to do that. It doesn't mean you're gonna hit the child or you're gonna kill the child. No, it doesn't mean that. But you have to tell the child that it was wrong. Sometimes it's just I have to just run away from them, leaving them in this house and just run away. Because I don't have. Sometimes they are taking control of me. It's not me taking control of them.
As Rebecca's children have grown, she is continually surprised by differences between Sudanese and Australian culture.
Like, I've got 3 girls here. My elder one is 18 now. If somebody want to marry that girl, or just that person want to talk to that girl, that person have to contact the parent, and she have to come, is allowed to come in the house. Maybe my girl talking with 4 or 5 different boys. Those boys all the parents have to know that boys, and they have to know the background of the boys. And one day, maybe the girl was going to choose one boy, but that boy, if he's not a good person, we said no. If I don't like that boy, and my husband and all my people don't like that boy, we said no. Sometimes bring fighting. The girl said, I like that boy, but we said no, we don't want that boy. sometimes bring a lot of problem, but in the end, the problem might be solved. The girl might be married the right person.
Volunteering offers local people the chance to learn more about our new African neighbours. I spoke with Sophie Clark, who is a volunteer at Centrecare, an organisation that helps new arrivals in their first 6 months in Australia.
I'm one of the youngest volunteers, and I became involved because I intend to go travelling overseas and work overseas with people. And I saw that volunteering in Hobart with refugees and new arrived families was a really good way of learning about different cultures, of developing that flexibility and that patience with sort of the language barriers and the cultural barriers. And it would, a lot of flexibility and open-mindedness when it came to being overseas and living in different cultures with different people. You get this wonderful feeling of fulfilment when you can help someone and help them become more independent. It's lovely to spend time with families that have children, because the children are always very friendly, and it's great making them smile and laugh. There was one experience which will probably stay with me for a long time, and that is we took our family to Bonorong Wildlife Park, and we took them there and showed them the animals. And I mean, for all of them, it was the first time they'd actually seen a kangaroo in the flesh, and a wombat and a koala, and they were able to pat them and feed them, and just the looks on their faces. It was just lovely. It was amazing. Being a volunteer, I've got an awareness of the problems which the families face, and because I work so closely with them, I have an understanding of their culture and where they're coming from. And I think that understanding is lacking in the general community as a whole, so that families are often treated with a bit of impatience because they don't understand, and they tend to face a lot of difficulty in areas such as housing and employment. I feel that they're up against discrimination because people don't understand them, they don't understand their culture, and they're fearful of that. I recommend that everyone, regardless of age, become involved in volunteering. As a younger volunteer, I haven't encountered any problems at all. It's been a fabulous experience. I've been able to balance my volunteering time around my work, around uni and around my friends, and I'm even getting my friends involved as well.
Reflection activity today. Let's do a sense poem. So, thinking about Sudan, what do you see? What do you hear? What do you taste? What do you feel? What do you smell? So complete those 5 sentences using the word Sudan. Homework time, as mentioned, it's going to be, I want you to spend 15 minutes on that vocab quiz. You're going to be complete masters of sociological words by the end of this year. Yes! Bonus homework for those who are keen as beans. Check out the SBS article on South Sudanese Australians. There's one on South Sudanese Australians and North Sudanese Australians, or Sudanese Australians, and they're both great. I really recommend you read them. It's bit.ly/whosudan. And again, if you want to read the full set of notes about this topic, go there. Thank you so much for taking part in this lesson. I really appreciate it. Otherwise, I'm sitting here in a room talking to myself. And as I always say, keep it real.